Hi everyone, I'm Raghu Olga De Silva, or Totally Out Now as you know me. I'm the director and co-founder of Speaking Minds, India's largest international speaker agency and B2B content curators. Over the last few weeks, we have journeyed through many interesting people and their stories, like Mark Ingalls, Vidya Balan, Baman Irani, Milan Soman, Tracy Smith, and the list goes on and on. Kathy O'Dowd, Richard Mullender, Liz Cashin, as you know. Each person sharing a very powerful message with us of courage, determination, grit, discipline, or core values to living a meaningful and inspiring life. Today, we have someone who has lived a life that many of us admire, but from afar. He has led a unique life with so many achievements and accolades that makes him one of the most sought after speakers in the corporate space. As usual, I'm looking forward to getting to the other side of our guest. Should we welcome Captain Raghu Raman? Captain.
Hi, Raga. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Thanks a ton for inviting me to
Well,
the
thank
other side.
we will we will not tell people what is the other side yet, right?
I don't know myself either. So I'm
we will discover together. Okay, so thank you, audience, who has joined us, and many people will join us, Captain. And as we go along, there will be comments, which I will obviously filter and talk to you about. Now, tell me first of all, I know this is a very normal question, but has the lockdown been treating you well?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think obviously there is this whole thing about not being able to move around and all, but I genuinely believe all of us still can count ourselves extremely lucky that we belong to a minority who can say that the lockdown hasn't affected them too adversely. I mean, look at the millions of people out there. Compared to them, I think we are all very well off. So I would say, yeah, very very well actually compared to
I
what's
agree.
going on.
Yeah, we're very privileged, isn't it?
Yeah.
But Captain, I've known you for a while now, and I've shared a lot of interesting stories, and you've shared a lot of interesting stories with me. But every time we've interacted, there's one thought that has always remained in my mind: is you're an expert on leadership, and I know that male leaders have a certain way of working. So, do you think that male leaders are not encouraged to be vulnerable?
I actually once did a talk which I called.
Oh, hi. I think we've, for some reason, lost Captain. Until then, I think we shall reconnect. So today we are talking to Captain Raghu Raman, who has been in the armed forces for about 12 years and in the corporate space for over 12 or 14 years. He's an exceptional man. Every time we have a request for someone who can talk about leadership and about journeys and stories of people who have dealt with difficulties and challenges and how to manage challenges, Captain is the first person we think of. Captain has been amazing in the way that he manages not only his life, but he has made a difference to many. I don't know whether you guys are aware that Captain does a lot of talks. He does TEDx talks. There's huge amount of repository that's available online. He writes columns. And Captain is back.
Oh yeah, I'm back. I'm sorry about that. This technical issues. So actually, before we begin, one of the good things we can learn from the army is before any briefing begins in the army, the first announcement that is made by the person who's briefing, and the announcement is made in Hindi because the troops' language is, orders are usually given in a mix of Hindi and Urdu and all, carrying from British legacy. And the briefing begins by saying कि अगर मेरे briefing के दौरान दुश्मन का हवाई हमला होता है या उसकी गोलाबारी होती है तो alternate briefing site will be so and so. So you actually begin with the business continuity process to explain. So in case we do go offline, because it can happen, we are on a virtual world and sometimes the internet accept. This is also, by the way, 8:30, 8:45. In case you didn't know, is the peak streaming time. This is the time when most people are streaming their videos and Netflix and all of that. So if the internet goes off, I will come back in again. So
I hope I thought that I scared you away and you went on your horse and ran away. But hey, you're back.
In the first 30 seconds, right?
So, within a minute, I scared you away. Okay, so
yeah,
we're talking
I
about
just want to answer your question that you asked me about leadership. You said something about
leadership and vulnerability.
and male leaders. So as I was telling you, I do a session. I did a talk once. I think it's somewhere in YouTube called "The Future is Feminine," and I genuinely believe that. And by the way, before I go further down that road, I want to also clarify. I said the future is feminine, and the feminine traits are not necessarily the prerogative only of women. I mean, you know that, right? But what I meant by that is, I think the future will belong to vulnerable leaders. They will belong to leaders who can create an environment of psychological safety. Because in any crisis, when we are in a chaotic, and I mean, this is not even VUCA, this is a ruptured world. VUCA was volatile, uncertain. This is ruptured. It's completely broken. You have to start from scratch. Companies like Zoom, which you did not hear of, StreamYard, you didn't hear of this company, a few months ago. Zoom is worth more than IBM or equal to IBM now. And companies like WeWork, which were banking a lot on real estate, physical space, and all of that, they have lost close to about 80% of their valuation in a matter of 3 months. So in this world of crisis, leaders will not have the answers. No leader will have the answer. No leader can have the answer. So what the leader needs to do is to set a general direction and create an environment of psychological safety where leaders at every level are able to take decisions based on the strategic intent. They're not looking for orders all the time. Similarly, I think if organizations have to navigate themselves out of this crisis, they will have to come up with innovative, creative ways of doing work. I mean, you have had to, like, in the space that you are working in, and so many other organizations, whether they're in the event space or sports or real estate, suddenly they'll have to rediscover their businesses. They'll have to rediscover the way they go to the market and their value proposition. Everything they'll have to rediscover. Now, for them to be able to rediscover, they need a very vibrant set of employees who are bringing in tribal knowledge, who are bringing their relationships and contacts and ideas. But that's only going to happen, again, in a psychologically safe environment. Because if the environment is insecure, I don't know whether I'll have my job or not, next quarter pata nahi hoga ki nahi hoga, so I'll constantly be watching out for my own, what's in it for me. How do I safeguard my job, instead of looking at how do I look at the organization going to the next level, because I'm insecure. Similarly, you cannot bring in innovation, creativity in an environment of fear, in an environment of pink slips, in an environment of, if you don't behave properly, you've been coming late, so you're the most likely guy to be sacked. So I think leaders will have to become vulnerable. It's not a choice. So it's not about, you got a macho alpha leader and a vulnerable leader, and you can pick between these two. I don't think so. I think again, when I say alpha leaders, I'm not making it gender specific. You know that you have alpha is also not a prerogative only of the male. But I think that style of leadership will be in, and a great example is to look at countries who have had vulnerable leaders as their prime ministers or presidents. And you've seen that those countries have, even in this pandemic, they have been far more inclusive. They have taken, I mean, the trauma in those countries has been much lesser than in countries which have supposedly had, very, very alpha, decisive, strong leaders. So I think in a crisis, there is a room for decisiveness, but there is also immense requirement of empathy and vulnerability. And empathy, as you're aware, is much more a vulnerable leader who's likely to correlate with empathy.
Sure, but Captain, a lot of leaders don't show their vulnerability for many reasons, because vulnerability is also seen as a weakness, right? People say you're so vulnerable, so weak. So in today's environment, in the corporate space that you are, the kind of talks and the kind of people you speak with, the kind of people we speak with, do you think that people put their hands up and say, actually, I don't know what's coming, I have no idea?
No, so I think we often, to counter an argument, I'm not saying you're doing that, but very often in our thinking, to counter an argument, we take the other extreme. You say that either you have to be an alpha leader or you have to be completely vulnerable. It's obviously the answer lies somewhere in the middle. I don't think leaders will, troops don't really like leaders who don't know, so you can't come in front of troops and say, I don't know. Then troops will tell you that, then why should I follow you if you don't know? So whether you have to take a decision this way or that way, take that decision, spare us the indecision of not knowing which way the future is. So I don't think a leader who says, I don't know what's going on, will be a leader who will be, leader for long. I think the leader has to say that I don't have all the facts with me, but I do know what my intent is. My intent is to make sure that this organization survives so that all the people dependent on this organization have a best chance of surviving. In doing that, if we require to cut some people for the time being, we need to do that, because this is a life raft which has got a capacity of 20. If we overload it to 30, then all 30 will die. So we will have to take it to 20, which means that 10 will have to be let go of this point. But the moment we are more stable, we'll come back for that 10. So I think people are expecting leaders not to have answers to the situations, but definitely answers to what's next steps. What do we do?
Great.
Even if that next step is we need to consolidate, we need to understand what our outstandings are. We need to understand what's our sort of liabilities. We need to understand where we can cut costs. So some harkat has to happen, and that leader has to lead that harkat. So a leader who is seeming directionless, where do I go? Which way do I go? He or she will create a vacuum, and that vacuum will very quickly be filled up with, in fortunate cases, with some other leader, in unfortunate cases with general mayhem and grapevine and gossip. So I think we have to balance that. I think being vulnerable is not equal to being clueless. Being vulnerable is a leader who says that I understand, I'm equally afraid, I'm equally apprehensive, I understand your concerns, those concerns relate to me also, but we will figure out a way to do this. I think that we will figure out a way is the prime responsibility of a leader. The leader cannot abdicate that responsibility. We can't, during a crisis, leader can't say, I don't know. You're not required during good times. During good times, an Excel sheet runs the organization. It's during crisis that we require the leadership to be displayed.
And the way you described it, it's a ruptured world right now, right? So Captain, the army goes through this every day. How do we learn, and what do we learn from the army? I mean, this is their reality, right? Isn't it?
Every day and every night.
Exactly. So I want to know more about it, and I want at this point for you to share that rope story, which I absolutely love. There is so much relevance on decision making, in these crises, these times of crisis.
So I think two or three elements I think can be learned from the armed forces. And when I say army, I don't necessarily mean just the Indian Army. The armed forces, as you're aware, have been a repository of management thought and knowledge and strategy, leadership of people, negotiations. It basically all starts with conflict. More contenders fighting for less resources is the definition of war. It's also the definition of business. More contenders are fighting for the same customer. You're fighting for the same wallet share. You're fighting for that same budget, which say marketing or LNOD has, which is being solicited by many other entities as well. So basically, the principles remain the same. So we can learn a lot from the armed forces. I think 2 or 3 lessons that we can learn in this kind of a crisis, especially, is that firstly, you will have to take decisions with about 60 to 70% of information. That's it. You will never get more than 80 to 90, 100. Because the theory says that if you've got about 60 to 70% of the information about the situation, go ahead and take a decision. Because your time that you will take to get that additional 20, 30% to make it 90%, that time will make that decision, window of opportunity irrelevant. You might get that more clarity, but by that time, that window of opportunity would have gone. So first is to be able to take decisions in an environment of ambiguity. Now that's extremely tough, extremely tough for leaders who have been brought up in a zero error syndrome environment. So in the past, if you've been brought up in a zero error syndrome, don't try this, don't touch this knob, don't change this. If an iron broke, don't fix it. Don't question tradition. Then basically what will happen is you will be looking for a templatized answer to this current crisis, for which there is no templatized answer. It never happened in the people are comparing it with Second World War or something, but that's a stupid comparison. You can't compare with Second World War. It's a completely different situation. You can't even compare it with the Spanish pandemic and all of that. There is no comparison. It's a completely new situation, right? Matter of fact, it's a very interesting analogy to understand that when new paradigms come, many of us choose to define it by what it is not rather than what it is. So, for example, when the first automobiles came, nobody could call it an automobile. They called it a horseless carriage. So they took something that they could understand and removed something from it to define a car. They said it's a horseless carriage. So similarly, in a crisis situation, you can't go to the past and say this is Spanish flu plus airlines. It doesn't work like that. It's a completely different paradigm. And in that paradigm, you need to take decisions based on the 60-70% of information that you have. So that is point number one, that it's better to take a okay decision today than to take a perfect decision day after tomorrow when that decision has no relevance. The second is focus on basic drills. Again, doesn't matter which army you are, where you are, which theater you're operating in. There is no substitute for a good soldier's drills, the battle drills, physical fitness, the ability to fire, the ability to aim, the endurance that you can bring yourself to after 72 hours of route march. All of these things are basic drills. Now, how does that translate into? So your ability to discern the customer's requirement, your ability to turn around a proposal, your ability to be extremely flexible, both on the delivery and on the pricing and on the pricing terms. These are basic drills. These are drills which will stand any organization in good stead. And the way I describe this situation to a lot of my friends is like, this is a bit like, two boxers who are boxing and both of them punched each other in the face and both of them fell down. Now, both of them are knocked out. The winner will be decided by the person who gets up first during the count of 10. So now when the revival begins, which organizations are able to revive quickly, get their customers quickly, consolidate them fast, those are the organizations that will have a better chance of surviving this crisis. And for that, they will have to go back to basic drills. And this is not the time for them to be experimenting some new platform or some new management mantra. You have to go back to the basic drills. So the importance of basic drills, again, is underscored by the army. And I think the third one is extreme collaboration, because one of the things that I think defines, this is not very apparent to civilians. Most civilians don't understand this. For example, in my career, I've gone to for aid to civil authorities in Punjab when the floods were on there, or been to earthquake. All of Indian Army has been there, not just me. Everybody has been there. Now, nowhere in our training we are trained for earthquake relief duties. There is no such syllabus in our training, or flood relief duties. There is no such training. But when the units reach there, and one unit may be coming from Amritsar, another unit may be coming from Sangrur, and they may have never worked before. But the moment they come in there, like Lego blocks, they fit into each other. And the reason why they fit into each other is that their basic drills, the basic protocols, the basic sort of covenants for collaboration, they're already set. They're already in place. And not just in the Indian armed forces, they're already in place in the global armed forces. And that's why a United Nations peacekeeping force is commanded by a Nigerian, the number 2 guys in Indian, the battalions there are 7 different countries, and they are working on one radio net, and they're still able to work together. Like aviation pilots, for example, commercial aircraft pilots, they have a protocol which enables them to communicate with any country of the world, right? So the locations of the map. So Bombay is not called Bombay in the aviation parlance. It's got a code to it, and that code is universal code. So I think this is also a time where organizations need to become more collaborative rather than becoming more inward. So I hear some of these financial geniuses giving these mantras, which you must have heard, that how do you navigate through these crises, and the mantra that they give is that try and delay your payments, but do all your collections as fast as possible. So if everybody does that, then who's going to pay? These are not very collaborative strategies. These are very, very myopic strategies. कि तुम अपना पैसा बचा कर रखो, औरों को पैसा मत दो. How will it work in an environment? So I think this is also an opportunity for a lot of us to not just professionally, but also socially realize that when crises happen, it's a great opportunity to rebuild those bonds, to rebuild those connections. Now, those connections could be business partner connections. They could be connections with companies that have synergy with each other, and them getting back together to create a joint product for their client. I was advising a bunch of friends. A few of them had, they knew that they're very likely to be let go from the organization they're working. in. And I was saying that instead of each one of you piecemeal trying to find a job, why won't you offer your services as a composite unit of 5? So let's say this is a media industry. So as a composite unit of a person who can write, a person who can edit, a person who can do that. Now, suppose you offered this as a composite unit to, let's say, some media house, even on a part-time basis, you're far more likely to find your gigs, so to speak, than if you went individually. So I think all the three elements, the ability to take decisions with not complete information, the importance of going back to basic drills, and the importance of collaborating with the various different partners or associates with whom you had worked, but had kind of, when the going is good, we kind of all sort of drift apart and we do our own stuff. But when the going gets tough, it's a good idea for all the rafts to sort of connect with each other so that they can survive the storm. Piecemeal, the rafts will be drowned.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And I'm still waiting to listen to hear the rope story, But brilliant insights.
Rope, as you're aware, and to the listeners who don't know it, this is a short story that I'd written many years ago. It was actually written in 1993-94. This was set in the situation of Siachen. It's an old story, but it's still very relevant because in Siachen, nothing much changes in those temperatures. And this was first published in a magazine called The Infantry, which is an internal magazine for the army. And then it kind of went viral, and whenever any accident takes place in Siachen, it again gets a life of its own. And a few of the other seniors like General Atta Hasnain and a few others have mentioned it in their talks. So it has a. So this was a series of about 6-7 stories I'd written. Only one of them got published in the magazine. The rest, 2-3 of them were considered to be not. Anyway, so I think this talks about the reality of leadership. It basically reminds us that tough leadership, and especially combat leadership, is not between a right and a wrong. It is usually between one wrong and another wrong. Both sides are going to cost lives. The trick is to lose as few as possible. Now, that is a reality for most leaders in the world as well, that most tough decisions are not between a right and a wrong. It's not even between one right and another right. The tough ones are between one wrong and another wrong. And usually it is the cross that the leader has to bear, that regardless of which decision she takes, the constant gnawing in your head that should I have taken the other one will always, that's something that you will carry. That's a cross that you bear. That's the burden of command. So it basically talks about that element, and it talks about, I think when people are in their 20s, as I'm sure you remember, from last year or whatever.
Thank you. Of course, you and I both remember that, don't we?
I think we are very afraid. We are afraid because we have an image to live up to ourselves. We have our expectations of parents and all of that. We have a lot of fears. We have a lot of ignorance, and we also have a lot of arrogance. So combined with all of this, I think there is a high sense of insecurity and concern in leaders who are in their 20s to, I would say, even late 30s. By late 30s, by 40s, you become a little more seasoned. You would have had more failures. You would have realized that failures aren't as devastating as you think them to be. Neither are successes as joyous as you, or the joy is not as permanent as you thought them to be. Both are very, very temporal, and you soon learn that nothing is as good or as bad as it seems at first. So as you come later in life, when you look back at your 27, 28, 30-year-old self, and you say, I was stupid, or I was silly. But at that point, you were not stupid. At that point, with the amount of wisdom you had, the knowledge you had, the fears you had, the insecurity you had, the decisions you took, the steps you took were okay. That were the best you can do. So I think it's also kind of important for us, I would say, to be able to forgive our 28-year-old versions, or our 32-year-old versions, or 35-year-old versions. Not forgive publicly, but forgive to ourselves, and then live with that, say, okay, fine, ho gaya. We made that. It was a decision taken. I think that also enables us to be more at peace with our current decisions that we take, which may be wrong, which may bother us a lot, which may make us very fraught. But if we are just able to think that, okay, when I think about these decisions 10 years from now, will they really be as angsty? And then you have your history to look back to and say, yeah, when I took those decisions when I was in my late 20s, it's okay. At that point of time, it seemed like a heaven and earth-shaking decision, but now it doesn't seem. So I think that perspective also comes out from these kind of stories. So in a way, it was kind of my journal that I wrote at that point of time. One of them got published, the others didn't, and so that's the story of the rope.
So we're talking about our younger selves, right? Like yesterday. So let's talk about the youth and the pandemic, Captain. I mean, we've had this conversation prior. And so what is the impact? What happens now? I mean, none of us know, of course. But, how do we manage this?
I think one of the first things we have to do is to fully accept the true extent of the situation. So either any which way you want to dress it up, vaccine, no vaccine, we are all on the same boat, all of those things. The point is that the global GDP is going to go down by about 25-30%, whatever. I mean, you like it or not, we can keep talking about, let's buy more and all of that. But so in other words, from a world that was already struggling for jobs, already struggling for increase in economy, even before the pandemic, now we are going to go, so 30% of the jobs that was supposed to be out there are not going to be there. 30 is a conservative estimate. Now, what happens to those people? What happens to people who were hoping that we will finish our education and find a job? Some people say we can study more, but that's a very privileged lot. Most of them, most middle-class families have a very fixed timetable, and the timetable says that when this son starts graduating and starts adding to the family's income, then this second step of buying a house with the I mean, these are all very, very calculated steps that middle-class families, the margins of error, the margins of buffers are very, very wafer thin. You know that. I mean, you know that in most of India, I think a metaphor is the rain. There's a one good rain in Bombay and the whole of Bombay sort of jams. The reason is that the city is operating on a wafer thin margin. Just 2 inches of rain is the margin that it is able to take. And that is true for many people in their lives as well, that one dengue in the family will wipe out 6 months of savings, or one sort of sickness, 3 days in the hospital is. So I think there is going to be a fair amount of young people who will come into the society, come into the job market, and who will be extremely dejected, disappointed, and therefore depressed. Now, this is a reality. There is no running away from it. I mean, I think the first step is for us to acknowledge that this is the scale of the problem. This is the situation. The second step is, so what do we do? How do we fix this? And there are a couple of thoughts that I have more at an abstract level, and some which are much more at a tangible level. At the abstract level, I think this is almost a reminder of how societies, families, individuals, you and I, we managed when we didn't have resources, right? So a lesson actually that we could take is from our parents' life. So when your parents or my parents, they came from there, like my parents came from south of India and they came to Delhi to look for jobs and all of that. I mean, those days trains used to take 3 days, 4 days to travel from Kerala to Delhi, and there's no mobile, nothing. So if a young woman was applying for a job in Delhi and she got onto the train by herself, the father basically would tell somebody else in the compartment that, if you're going to Delhi, can you look after my daughter during the way? And those relationships would be made, and those relationships sometimes would be more strong than blood relationships as well. So an entire community of immigrants, I'm using the word, it's not technically correct, but people who came from other states into metros, they created their network with friends and all of that because there wasn't plenty, because there was a constraint of resources. I don't know if you remember this, but when I was a kid, it was very common for 3 or 4 families to come into one home to watch TV.
Correct.
And the Sunday movie was not so much the movie, it was the gathering of 4 families. They would have dinner. They would, there were connections. Those connections have been lost now. They were lost in the generation where in the same home, four of the people are watching four shows in four different screens because it's available. It's okay. You can watch four different uh, customized programs, and that whole drive towards making every product so individual, every profile so specific to insulate people from each other. I think this is a great opportunity for us to realize that this is the time for us to collaborate, because if there is only one TV that you can afford, then I think the amazing part is all of us can watch the same movie and experience that as an entertainment, which is far superior to saying that I didn't watch the movie that I wanted to watch. So I think our compass has to reorient itself. It has to reorient itself from material metrics of success to what is really valuable, and that is an opportunity that is afforded during any crisis. So I've always found, matter of fact, in all training, you're aware of that. You're aware of the training programs that. So
Yeah.
whenever we are doing experiential training, you want to forge a team together. You put them through a trauma together. That's the whole philosophy of the commando course. They take the 100-odd commandos and they put them through hell. So when you're put through hell together, by the time you come out from the other end of the pipeline, you're all forged together as a team. So I think this is a great opportunity. I'm not saying, I mean, oh, so it's good that this came. I'm not saying that, but now that it's here, it's a great opportunity for organizations, for families, for companies to say, how do we build, because of the scarcity, how do we build a stronger camaraderie using the scarcity as a binding factor?
But what is your advice to the youth who are basically in a situation where there are no jobs? The graduates passing out, there are no jobs. I mean, how disheartening would that be to a young person?
Right, that's a good point. So I've been asked this question, by the way, recently. I teach in a couple of colleges, and so here's the deal. So those who graduate in the Indian education system, who are in the tier 1 schools and colleges, 98 percentile cutoffs, you know that in Bombay, most of the colleges, in Delhi also 98%, 99% cutoff. The world has thousands of students who are way below 30%, 40% and all. They also find jobs. They find jobs. They may not find it in big MNCs and all, but they find it in small, mom and dad outfits. There are many of people who work in the same small firm, 8-man firm for 20, 25 years, and happily. They work there happily. They have a happy life. Their comrades look after them. Their boss looks after them. Everyone doesn't have to work in the top 10 corporates to have a great place to work. A great place to work can be anywhere. So I think, firstly, for a lot of people who say there are no jobs, yeah, there are less jobs, but there are jobs. There are jobs. Now, that doesn't mean that it's going to be a job that you had aspired and thought, okay, I've done my MBA, I've done my engineering, so it's going to be an MNC. My starting salary is going to be, 60 lakhs because I've done my MBA from ABCD institution, and that's not there. That's not there. But that doesn't mean jobs are not there. That is not the only job. There are many other jobs. There are many other. A job, to my mind, right now, if somebody, I'm not, of course, I'm keeping in mind that for many people, it's financially existential, finding a job. So it's not something that, take a year for discovering yourself or study more. So I understand for a lot of people, it's a harsh reality that money has to be paid, loans have to be paid, EMIs have to be paid. So getting a job is almost like a timeline. It's not a goalpost that can be shifted. But having said that, I think it's also great. So I'll give you an example. Like, recently I'm teaching in the Masters Union University that's opened up, and I had to speak to students who are joining the B school this year, right? And I think I was actually reminded of a lesson which Anand Mahindra spoke about. I don't know whether he remembers it or not, but this was a lesson that he just said it, and it was a great learning. So this was the time in 2008 when, sorry, not 2008, 2002, when the dot-com bust had happened and all the IT companies were going through hell. You remember that time, right? He said at that time that any company that can survive during this crisis will have very strong immunity. It's true. So any child, youth who's going through so I would compare this to when you're practicing for Olympics. No, I don't know if you're aware of this. Athletes who practice for Olympics, they're taken to high altitude. So like our Indian athletes, they're trained in Leh. Similarly, all countries train their athletes in a high altitude. The reason why they do that is they're getting that runner to be able to operate at peak efficiency at low oxygen. So when he comes back to full oxygen, his performance shoots up, right? It's like you're training all the time. You're training how to swim with weights in your legs or running with weights in your legs. And on the day of the competition, the weights are taken off. So you will just, you'll fly. So in a way, the batches who are entering into the colleges now, into the job market now, to my mind, I think they would have arguably seen the worst that life could have dealt to them till now. Of course, life can have surprises. 2021 may be worse. But 2020 is arguably one of the worst scenarios in which the students are coming into college, the students are getting out of college to find their first job or whatever. So I think it's going to be a great battle inoculation for them. And it sounds good for me to say that, but I know it will be very tough, but most battle inoculations are very tough. So that's why they're called battle inoculations, because they take you through the trauma of a battle and they make you a blooded veteran. You become, you're no longer green troops, you become seasoned troops, and seasoned troops only become seasoned troops with actual skirmish. So for many of the students and young people who would be entering into job markets or looking at job markets, I think that trial by fire is happening at a very early stage in their career, very, very early stage in their career. So to them, I would say that, you have to redefine what is a job. Job is not necessarily what you imagined it's going to be. Job could be anything. It could be working, setting up stuff for somebody's website. It could be the gig economy. It could be manual labor. It could be, I'll tell you, this actually happened when I was in school. I had a friend called Rajaram, and he's a very, very well-to-do LIC agent now, one of the top guys, and I think rightfully so. During summer vacations in Delhi, he got a job as a, he said one day he came and said, I got a part-time job during summer vacations. And the job was putting water in water coolers in government buildings. So government buildings had this water cooler to basically take water and put it in that. Now, I can tell you this, that for a boy or a girl in 1980s to be told this is a job, you would say, yeah, pani dalna, this is not a job, right? It was almost like, I think one of the most valuable lessons which a lot of Indians, myself included, our generation included, have not had the privilege of learning, which you and maybe many others, Nicola and all, have had, is the lesson of dignity of labor. I think that dignity of labor lesson is a great opportunity for all of us to learn at this point of time. And we are learning. I mean, we are learning the importance of I think the number of societies who now recognize the importance of a maidservant, or now recognize the importance of a driver and their value to their life. So I think there is enough stuff to be done by the youth also. And one of the things they have to remember is, in the end, it becomes okay. It's not that it doesn't become okay. And resilience is there all around us. I mean, you've lived in Bombay, I've always wondered, in Bombay, always I've wondered, not just in Bombay, in Delhi also I've wondered, that when these rains happen, these heavy rains, where do the people of the payments go? Where do they go?
Yeah.
Where do they go?
Correct.
Right? Physically, where do they go? I mean, they may go under over bridges to protect themselves from the rain, but if it's raining for 2 days, as it was in Bombay, 2 days, where do they go?
Yeah.
Right? So when you look at someone like that and say they have resilience, they're surviving, so it's okay, we'll figure out a way. And once you have that in your heart that we'll figure out a way, generally you will figure out a way. The way will come to you, because it's more of a question of resolving that I have to figure out a way, and that way comes. I don't know how it will come, what the answers will be, what the contours will be, but it will come.
Fantastic, because the younger audience watching us, or parents of younger people watching, I think there are very valuable lessons. I have two twins who are 22 years old, and they are facing this as well, crisis. My son, who's a computer expert, he basically is working in the supermarket right now. And when I shared this with someone in India, they laughed. They said, "Oh my God, are you mad?" I mean, but that thinking we have to change. Those conversations or narratives in our own mind we have to change, so that you
should tell whoever told you that do you know that your Tesco in UK, it's mandatory for every senior leader to work as a teller in the store for 1 day in a year. Now it might sound very, I saw hona chahiye, nice, cute to have, but I'll tell you a story behind it.
Sure.
So the legend is that the CFO of Tesco, when he was there in the store in the teller machine, he realized that loaves of bread, like this one, you know, a loaf of bread, if you have some box like this, that bread has a barcode on one side.
Right.
And the teller had to move the box like this to have it read in the barcode. And that movement would take 1 or 2 seconds. And the CFO realized that this could be fixed very simply by just having the barcode printed on all 4 sides, and shaving off those 2 or 3 seconds per customer resulted in millions of pounds being saved. So there is much to be said about children going and learning how to serve in a restaurant, how to pack in a supermarket, how to repair cars, how to clean someone's AC or whatever, and earn money from there, because they're learning life skills. So I would actually feel sorry for the people who laugh
Yeah,
at
I get
that, and I wonder what must be happening to their kids in terms of mindset. What would they think is job good enough to be done?
No,
Some
exactly.
research in a private equity firm about somebody. I mean, I don't know. So I think.
These are conversations that happen. These are things reactions that happen, and it's okay for them. But, I think for the wider youth listening in today, and for parents like us who have absolutely no problem with our children doing whatever they have to do, as long as they're doing a job and they're doing an honest job of it, I'm there with them. Okay, I'm going to take some few questions, because now we're going to get to the other side of the captain. Okay. So now we've got lots of comments here, but I will ask some questions. Sneha Walke says, what about younger leaders? Now, it's a possibility, Sneha, that Captain may have responded to this. What about younger leaders who perhaps don't have the luxury of age, and thereby the wisdom that comes with it? And perhaps with the added responsibility of managing teams their own age or older. How do they balance this collateral damage of making mistakes that happen with age, and some other mistakes that perhaps decide the fate of the organizations?
So let me put it to you this way. And again, it's not that I'm going back into the army or anything of that, but I'll give you other examples also. So the last 100 meters of our nation's foreign policy, whatever our nation decides, last 100 meters of that is actually done by a 24-year-old captain. Right? So whether it's the defense minister, the prime minister, direction that they give, the last 100 meters of that policy, the last aircraft which takes you from one place to another place is flown by a 28-year-old pilot. He is handling the life of 150, 200 people in that flight. The fighter aircraft that we bought at I don't know how many millions of dollars is being flown by a 25-year-old pilot. So this belief that youth and I actually young leaders are the ones who have really sort of altered the history of the world, the course of the world. It's very rarely been altered by 70, 80-year-old people. It's always been altered by very young leaders. So I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that this conferring leadership on people who have white hair or no hair is a very recent phenomenon. If you actually go back just 20, 30 years ago, you will find that the top pilots, the top surgeons, the top doctors, the top chefs, they were fairly young people. I mean, they were in their late 30s. People were supposed to be reaching the pinnacle of their profession. So I don't think we need to be very concerned. A young person needs to be very concerned about their lack of wisdom. Maybe sometimes that wisdom is a baggage. So it's good to be conscious of the fact that you are not encumbered by past baggage. At the same time, I think if young people also have the humility to say that I can learn, not necessarily from old people, from anybody, and I can learn from people who are less educated than me. I can learn from people who are differently able than me. They can give me a perspective. That humility usually comes with age. So there is no reason why that humility cannot come earlier also. The humility comes with age because in youth, usually youth are insecure. All of us, when we are young, we have an external scorecard against which we are comparing everything. Which college did I go to, whether it was first day placement or not, did I get computer science versus electronic engineering, did I get it? So it's constantly a comparison of a scorecard. Then these advertisements all around us keep telling us you're not good enough, you're not
Right.
You don't have a beach ready body, you're not doing this, you're not. So it's constantly you are being made to feel insecure when you're young. And when you're young, impressions matter much more. How people think about you is much more of a concern to you. And as you get older, you start giving a flying fish to what people think. But if you can bring that philosophy that I care about people, but I don't care what they think about me at a younger age, then I would find that to be an amazing combination. That is the security of a slightly older person, but the chutzpah and the ability to take risks and the ability to leap where the angels fear to tread, that will come with youth. So I think if we are able to combine that, my sense is the younger leaders have always outperformed their peers or their predecessors. That's a fact. We have seen that always, not just now. Every generation, the younger leaders have taken the world to the next level. So
I agree. And I also, I mean, look up to the younger people as much as, they should be looking up to us. And they do, I think. So Ritu Nag has asked a very interesting question. Which single unique skill will help people in leadership positions sail through this uncertain crisis? If there's one skill, yeah.
Yeah. So, who said that? Ritu, you said, right? So I often, I would advocate that don't even ever have this construct in your head of that one single skill, one single book, the top 3 movies, the top 2 songs. They don't exist. They exist only for a listicle, to make a list, and there is no one skill you can learn, period. It's as simple as that. So if you ask me, what is the one skill required to become a great sports person? What can that skill be? Can it be stamina? Can it be eye coordination? Can it be strength? It needs a combination of all of that. So the one skill would be to say that I need a multitude of skills and I need a combination of them to work. And in many cases, that combination may not exist in me. So I need to create a team. I need to create a collaboration where I have these skills on demand. When I require these skills, I have these skills on demand. That ability of an individual to be able to get other people working with them, so I'll give you an example. When I was a CEO first time of a company called First Choice, so I had those days no idea P&L kya hota hai, and but I had to count the number of zeros to figure out whether it's a lakh or a crore. If somebody changed it into millions, I had to start all over again. That was my fan. So I actually sat at the feet, literally at the feet. I used to go every night. There was a friend of mine called Prabir Talati. He's now working in one of these big private equity firms. But that time he was also a young person who was, I think, working with Ambit or one of those. So he's the one who taught me how to make an Excel sheet, how to make a P&L. He would explain to me what is the rate of return, what do financial institutions look for, and all of that. Now, the fact is that knowledge of that man, who was a genius in the financial space, was only available to me when I would go to his house and sit at his feet and say, "Ye samjha de yaar, kaisa hota hai?" I think that ability to say, "Ye samjha de bhai, mere ko samajh mein nahi aata. Can you explain this to me? I need to learn this." That one skill, and it's a great skill that young leaders can have, because young leaders don't need to have that ego. They can go to anybody. They can go to that current sales manager of their company and say, "Sir, jara mere ko samjha do ki aap har saal aapka sabse zyada sale kaise hota hai." And that guy, if you're really humble, if you go with genuine humility to him, he may or may not, but most likely so I think that skill is the most important skill. There is the ability to extract the best from people, or even the good from people, to your line of thinking. I think that skill is an essential skill during this time. That's the most important skill.
Fantastic. Seriously, I could just be listening to you, Captain. But Captain, now tell me, stressful life. We all have stressful lives. And however we look at it, there are stresses and challenges, right? I know for a fact that you have very interesting hobbies. Now, I'm going to do this in 2 parts. The hobbies that you have, one is like horse riding and biking. They're outdoor hobbies. How are you managing in the time of pandemic? Yeah.
So, of course, horse riding is more of a army, sort of relic. Even in normal times, you can't manage that in cities because there are hardly any riding clubs, and the 1 or 2 that you have in Bombay is basically you're riding behind one horse, in a circle. So it's a bit like the joggers park. When I first came to Bombay in Bandra, I went to this joggers park. So I was looking out, किधर है park? कहता यही है. This is the park. So I think यहाँ पे jog करने की जरूरत नहीं. You just stand, the crowd will take you around. So riding, I think, went out, but I used to. I think I compensated for. I think all young kids of my age, when I was young, we used to have cycles, and we used to keep cycling. And we used to explore the world cycling. Go around, and I was in Delhi, so I would explore the world. So I think it's a carryover, throwback, whatever, that midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it. So when you repeat your youth, you don't cycle now, so you motorcycle. So that's how but you know what, I've been riding motorcycles for many years. It's not matter of fact, I got some of these friends in these biking trips who say we are going to Leh and Manali and all that. I said, this used to be my buddy office commute. Yeah. what you are doing on that trip used to be our office commute. And those days we used to just sit in a bullet with that coat parka and this cotton, about a woolen gloves and whatever helmet and muffler tied, and we used to manage in -20. So I think I've always believed that travel is a great reboot of life. Teaches you a lot of things. You see life in its closest when you travel. And when you travel, one of the best ways to travel is by road, because when you travel by a flight, and I'm telling you also, by the way. So when you travel, you decide, okay, I'm going to go for a week to Goa or 5 days to Goa. You'll go from here, you'll rush to the airport, bheed, bhaad, badi pushing, they give me I card, this, that, Arogya Sattu, all that PP mask, this, then you're in an aluminium pipe, then you land there, and there those badi people are calling you with placards, they put you in a car. So you're going from a cadence which is fast, and you land up there fast. It's all fast. Everything is your metrotone of your life is going cut. It's going at that pace. But when you drive, or better still, when you ride, when you go from Bombay, the crowds, or this, that, then you get into the outskirts, and when you're out, and then suddenly you find on the road there is no traffic, there is nothing, and then there you find that it's just you. And that slows your metrotone down. It brings your cadence from tuck, 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 tuck to tuck, 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 tuck. And when you're in that slow speed is when you can actually look at life and, hey, look, that's a really pretty tree, or that is beautiful, or hey, this khakra that you're eating from a street joint is really tasty, it's very authentic, or this beans I have never seen before, and this is how beans is only produced in this much quantity, it's consumed in this district itself, it doesn't even reach the market. So you see all of these things when you slow down. And you can only slow down if you're traveling by road, because you have agency, you can control, you can stop, you can do stuff like that. And if you are in a bike, then you're also smelling, you're tasting, you're feeling, you're touching life as and you have, like, I remember once, I've never been able to get over it. Once I've gone on a trip to Northeast to see the Hornbill festival. There's a friend of mine who does these biking trips, great guy, Manoj Keshwar. So he had sort of organized this, and I had gone. And I remember it was like a Sunday morning, misty road. I don't know if you've been to the Northeast, but these winding roads and all that, and overcast and misty. And I saw a group of small kids, must have been between the age of 8 to 11 or 12. They had an air gun, they had bow and arrow, they had catapults, they had this contraption for fishing and all that. And a bunch, 4 or 5 guys, very happily dressed in tatters, bare feet, walking on the road. So I stopped them and I said, what are you doing? So they all speak in English there, Nagaland. So they say, going to get breakfast. Now this is a bunch of kids who's going actually to get breakfast. They're going out, they'll hunt some birds, this, that, catch some fish. And so it's as normal as some child whom you find on the road of Delhi or Bombay or London. They say, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to buy baguette. I'm going to buy bread. It's almost like that. These bunch of kids are going to the supermarket, which is the jungle for them, to bring breakfast. And when you look at that, and you suddenly realize that this is also life. This is also life. When you sit as a fly on the wall. Another trip I remember, we were in Manali, not Manali, we were in Leh. We were riding down from Leh to Manali, and there's this very small village. It's not even a village, it's a hamlet with 7 or 8 houses. There's a shack over there, and it was raining outside. It was cold, so I was sitting there with a couple of other riders in a blanket, just sitting in a corner. And I saw a bunch of these soldiers come to make a phone call, because mobiles don't work there. So they have to make a phone call using a landline. And after the phone call, that soldier is saying, "Acha, kitna hua?" Oh, 4 रुपए 50 पैसे, लेकिन आपके पहले के भी 50 पैसे, and you can actually find 50 paisa being traded, and then you suddenly realize that this is also life. I mean, this is life, and we have somehow forgotten, because of this 11 series iPhone and 7 series BMW, and this one is old, and that we have somehow forgotten that this is the real essence of life, and that comes to you when you travel, and it comes to you when you travel by road. So I would strongly recommend next trip you should be by road, and if you travel by road by bike,
yeah,
you
I
are
much do a lot of that. I know a lot of and I'm sure there are a lot of people here in the audience who love biking, I'm sure. But I've seen your photos.
And again, biking doesn't mean, a lot of people think biking means you have to have somebody BMW or Triumph. Biking means the best bikers I have seen on the road. I once met a film director from somewhere in Chennai in a normal Pulsar with some Rexine bag tied with a nylon cord in the back. He was traveling all over India. All over India, he was traveling just in that. That's it. And he was literally buying like warm clothing when he went to the mountains, or he was like just on the seat of his pants. And I think that is real exploration. That's biking. Biking is not wearing.
No, fantastic. Because Nicola and I, we always rent out a scooter.
There you go.
And we go around, and we go to places like that which we've never would have even imagined. And what a discovery! Eating simple food, meeting people who basically share part of their life which we cannot imagine. So it's beautiful.
They'll teach you, they'll point out something to you which you will never ever get from a book or a 5-star experience, a curated holiday. It's not going to come.
No, absolutely. So this is one side to you. And then the other, which I discovered very recently, and I was surprised, hypnotism.
No, so hypnosis is something that, by the way, it's very misunderstood. A lot of people think hypnosis means, everybody do some mumbo jumbo and make you levitate and all of that stuff. That's not true. Hypnotherapy is a very old form of, it's an old science. And matter of fact, a person of average intelligence is usually hypnotized maybe about 4 or 5 times in a week. They don't realize it. So when you drive a car, you're thinking of something and you keep thinking about it, and suddenly you reach your destination and when did I reach here? That's a form of hypnosis. Or you're half asleep in the early morning, when you're half asleep, half awake, and then you have a dream in which a bell is ringing, and suddenly you realize it's your phone ringing, which has come into your dream, and that's hypnosis. So hypnotherapy was something that I was interested in many, many years ago, and I studied it as I got accredited and all of that stuff. And I used it a lot in my training sessions, because you can actually make a person feel that they are in that zone, they are in that place, they can actually feel the cold. You've seen one of my sessions in which I do that leadership at 26,000, where people actually go into that zone where they feel cold and they start shivering, and so they can actually feel the ambience of being there, and then take a decision under those circumstances. So that's why I got interested in it. And of course, then usually when I get interested in something, I go like really deep into it. One of the ways to go deep is to seek out people who are really, really good at it, and spend time at their feet in some sense, and sort of learn from them. So I did that for almost 10-15 years now.
Is that why people clap for you when you finish a session? They stand and they clap for 10 minutes.
Well, those who go through the hypnosis, they don't, because they're in a daze. When they come out, they're crying and all that. You've seen that. Sometimes they go through a complete cathartic experience. But so I think that was a very good thing for me to learn that. I've always been interested in I won't use the word, I'm using the word with great care, with the occult, not occult in that sense. Interested in the effect of subliminal thinking, design thinking, how, like I was fascinated. I'm sure you didn't know this. So this is a gem of an anecdote that I learned very recently, and it has a lot of significance with COVID, by the way. Okay. Do you know that when they name a hurricane in the US, whenever a hurricane comes, it's an automatic, it's the roster. They just named the hurricane. Hurricanes that are named after women cause far more damage than the ones named after men. Did you know that?
I didn't know, but all the hurricanes I know, most of them are named after women.
No, there are many named after men also. But a hurricane named Howard will cause less damage than a hurricane named Hazel. That's
and
weird.
wow. So
And
why?
why?
So if they
Why?
know it, why? Yeah, why?
Because I'll tell you, the funny thing is, the hurricane named Hazel is not taken seriously by people. They don't take care. So it's very interesting, right? So you didn't think of it intuitively, but a
Right.
hurricane that has got a very soft name like Hazel is not taken seriously by people. They think that, oh, but it's something that is named like a so it's that subliminal, So people now behaving because of COVID in a paranoid manner. The same people will not wash their hands and they'll eat, from street, and they'll, they'll do all sorts of stuff, right? They will do all sorts of stuff which ranges from one end of bad hygiene to everything else. But of COVID, they're very scared now. So it's again that heuristic which acts, the availability heuristic, which makes a cogent, cognitive, intelligent human behave unintelligently. So this is all subliminal psychology, and a lot of it has to do with how your reptilian brain works, how your middle brain works, which is what hypnosis is all about, because hypnosis bypasses your thinking brain and goes straight to your emotional brain. Matter of fact, when you watch a movie, if you've seen a sad movie,
Yep.
seen movies like Black, let's say, sad movie, and you have cried, you have gone through hypnosis, because in the movie, in the screen, it's not true.
Yeah.
This is not true. The person is not dying of cancer. It's not true,
Mhm.
but you still cry. Why would you cry for something that you're not, you know not to be true, unless you're in a state of hypnosis? So you've been in a state of hypnosis. So studying that as a characteristic or a tool for better thinking, better decision making, better persuasion is, I found that a fascinating area. So yeah.
Fantastic. And one other thing that you surprised us with was your card magic. क्या है? Who
so,
are you?
so okay, as a kid, I was always interested, like many boys are. Those of you who've seen Modern Family know Phil Dunphy. Many boys are interested in but I was actually quite interested in cards from a very young age, and not so much about the magic part, but the illusions you can do with it, and the calculation, the wonder you can create wonder with it. And I think in a life which is full of pessimism, cynicism, bad news, wonder is a commodity that is in short supply. So if you can create wonder, it's and I started doing that for many years when I was young, and it was quite popular when I was in the army also. It's a great way to make friends and break the ice wherever you go. It's fun stuff that happens and all that. And I then started studying magic for a totally different reason, because magic is all about psychology, by the way. Most people think that, oh, magic means it's like some fun stuff. It is fun stuff, but it's mostly psychology. It's about a magician. I mean, I'm not saying I'm one, but a person who is in that is the only one who promises that he will fool you and then fools you, right? Usually politicians and all do the other way around. They say we won't fool you and then they fool you, right? And leaders also do that. So this is the only art form where they inform you up front that I'm going to fool you, so you can watch out. You can watch I'm doing what I'm doing and try and catch me. And it's all about misdirection. So how do you misdirect a person to look at something else? How do you guide their brain to look at a certain direction? It's also psychology. It's also leadership, because in a sense you are creating, I won't say illusion, but you are creating something which is every leader's principal job is to create a narrative. That's it. You basically create a narrative. And once you create a narrative, you can frame that instance in a completely different way. Let me give you an example. Let's say you like to run the marathon. Let's say, sake of argument, or whatever, you like to go for a trek. I mean, many listeners who have listened, who have tried to run a marathon or even a half marathon, they know that the day of running the marathon, it's a pain in the everywhere, from top to bottom. 21 kilometers running, and by the 16, 17 kilometer, you are like in, and you're hoping, and it'll be blisters and this and that. It's hurting. So the experience of that 2.5, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever time it takes you to complete your half marathon or full marathon, is a painful experience. It's a painful experience. There's no debate on that. But when you think back on that day, oh, that Sunday, Stand Chart Marathon, I was, fun. When you think back of that day, it was a great day. It was a great sense of achievement. So the question to be asked is that if you were asked to put down at the end of your life that 22nd of February or Jan, whenever you ran, what day was it? Was it a good day or a bad day? How will you put it down? It depends on which narrative you follow. If you follow the narrative of that day, I went there, but here I lost my car key also. By the time I reached there, it was late. A run already started. I tripped and I fell down, and this happened, that happened. I practiced, but I was tired and I didn't get. You can make that narrative and say it was a bad day. The other day was, yeah, but from standing start, 3 months time, I decided I'm going to run the half marathon. But it took me 3.5, 4 hours, but I ran the half marathon, ran it with my friends, and got the t-shirt, and I got that poster in my office. It was a great day. Totally depends on the narrative. So any art form, including magic, is essentially building a narrative. It's telling you a narrative, that this is the narrative. And once you tell that narrative, the audience or the people who are listening to it, they are in wonderment of that narrative. It's purely the narrative. So even when a person is watching magic or watching a movie, they know this is not true. It can't be true, right?
Oh, true.
But for that brief period, you are willing to dispel your or suspend your reality of what you know not to be true and go into a sphere of wonder. To take people from the reality of life into wonder, I think it's a great skill.
Yeah.
Even if it's used only for fun.
Yeah, amazing. Wonderment, I will tell you, I am in wonderment because my last half marathon that I ran was on the 22nd of Feb, and you just made that number up.
The stand chart is on that day, that's why.
But I ran in Brighton, in London. It was.
See, I got the date right,
Yeah, you got the date
magic.
right.
This is magic.
Magic here, wonderment. I have lots of questions. I typically speak to a speaker, for 45 minutes. This has gone well over an hour. How much you talk, Captain? But
Yeah.
But no, I have actually a couple of questions to ask you. May I? Is it all right? Okay.
Yeah.
Today, there was the Fit India dialogue where the Prime Minister Narendra Modi invited a few people from the fitness industry. They had Rujuta and health industry, Virat Kohli, and they had our Milind Soman. And it was very interesting. Milind asked him a question, and he said to him that, how do you manage detractors? Because, like, for instance, when Milind runs, a lot of people tell him their own limiting belief system. They'll say, oh, how can you are 55, you should not be running, you should not be doing this. And that happens to a lot of us in our lives, right? When we do something, there are a lot of people who will tell us what is their limiting belief system. How do you manage that? When you do so many different things, how do you manage, one, your detractors, and how do you manage this somebody else's belief system which is thrust upon you?
Very two simple rules. Firstly, don't tell them. Secondly, don't listen to them. So I think you have the answer there. So many of these things which I do, I don't tell people who I know have no value to add in it. And frankly, when people tell me, "Pagal ho gaya, is age mein tu magic kar raha hai," and all that, I don't listen to them either. So I think some areas, some compasses of your life, you should have your own center of gravity. You should have your own center of, that needle should shift the way you want it to shift. People will tell you, they won't just tell you their limitations. They will tell you their fears. They will tell you the excuses they tell themselves.
Correct.
To 55 में तेरा accident हो जाएगा तो फिर क्या होगा? Accident हो जाएगा तो मर जाएंगे और क्या होगा? Now, but they will tell you the fear that they have because of which they are not attempting it. And because they don't want to feel alone, they will superimpose that fear on you so that they will feel that by pulling a person who is doing it, I will be able to justify to myself why I am not doing it. So it's normal. It's very normal. And I don't hold it against them. It's very normal. I'm sure in some areas of life, we also do it to other people. We do that to other people. So it's normal. So one way not to be influenced by limiting factors of other people is A, don't tell them. B, if you tell them, don't listen to them. So I think it solves the problem.
Okay, my last question to you, Captain, is about, I'm going to come back to the first question, is being vulnerable. Do you allow yourself to be vulnerable?
I think the honest answer to it is, I don't think we have a choice of allowing ourselves to be vulnerable or not. I think we are all vulnerable. We have a choice of hiding that vulnerability. We can hide that. And we can hide it behind a facade of bravado or a facade of, I don't care, it doesn't hurt me. Facades, in my experience, don't really work. very much, because if you maintain the facade, it firstly takes a great toll on you, because it's like, here's the easy way to describe it. Let's say one day you have a bad neck sprain. I'm sure you must have had it at some point, slept in the wrong way and a bad neck pain. Okay. Now imagine having to go through the day with that bad neck pain and pretending you don't have it, right? So even when you have to turn like this, and within minutes, your colleagues or your friends will ask you, "Kya baat hai? There's some problem." They will be able to suss it out immediately. You'll have to go through the day. Imagine it's an important meeting, you can't. So you have to go through the day. Imagine the effort that it takes. How much of your mojo on a daily basis is spent towards handling the negativity of a bad neck pain? Just compare that with the facade that you have to maintain 24/7 of somebody who you are not. You're not as unafraid as you pretend to be. You're not as uncaring about the end result as you pretend to be. You're not as selfish as you pretend to be. You're greedy as you pretend to, whatever, your pretense is. I think it just takes a very, very heavy toll in trying to maintain a facade. So I think at the end of the day, all of us are vulnerable. Like if suddenly if tomorrow you read a newspaper report that all events businesses will be required to take FRCA clearance or whatever, of course you will be vulnerable. So shit, man, how does this affect me? Now pretending that no, it doesn't matter to me, is you're just kidding yourself. So I think it's not a choice. I think we are all vulnerable in equal measure as we are strong. I think you cannot be strong without being vulnerable. Period. But it takes a certain amount of confidence in yourself to be able to express that vulnerability, and I think that's something that each person has to work with themselves, with their levels of comfort, to say it's okay. I don't know. I think the day leaders start saying I don't know, समझा दे यार कैसे करते हैं, I don't know how this is done, they'll be on the path to vulnerability. Leaders who find it difficult to say I don't know, many of us do. I had, for a long period of my life, I found it a sign of weakness if you say I don't know. So you pretend you know than to admit you don't know. And then maybe as you grow older, maybe as life experience teaches you, like now it's fun for me to sit in a meeting and ask the full form of an abbreviation and then look at the faces, because maybe 50% of the people don't know that. They're in this industry for years, but they don't ask that, because if you puchunga to log bolenge, "Arey, tere ko pata nahi hai." But turns out that many of them don't know it. So I think it takes a little bit of time to be, and it took me time. I'm not saying it takes everyone time, but it took me time. But I think if leaders try to let go and say, okay, fine, if I'm vulnerable, big deal, dekhte kya hota hai. I don't think it's like, I don't know if you've read Illusions. Have you read Illusions?
Yes,
Richard
I've read. I was just going to tell you, sounds like Illusions. In fact, a couple of your conversations reminded me of that.
No, I've been very influenced by that book. I read it many, many years ago. I reread it many times. So in that, there is a story, I think you'll remember it, about these creatures who are living in a riverbed. And they cling on to the riverbed because the river is gushing on top. And one day, one of the creatures said, I'm going to let go and see what happens. Badi pagal ho gaya, tum mar jayega, ye, wo, and all, which is what society tells you. Are you crazy? Quitting a job, doing this, everybody mad. But he says, no, I'm going to see what will happen. And he lets go. And when he lets go, he is, of course, taken up into the surface and dashed against one side, another side. But as the river becomes broader and broader, he sails to the surface, and then he's like coasting along to the sea. And all the creatures look at him and say, look, he's flying. He's the Messiah. He's flying. So he's not flying. He's just let go. Yeah. And I think somewhere life teaches us lessons. I think a great lesson right now for many, many people who thought that they have all the time in the world is going to be there forever. They can choose to retire after 10 more years and they will have another 50 years. Life has told them, hey, listen, watch, you're not sure whether you're going to be there day after tomorrow. So, get your priorities right. So I think, yeah, that's one way of looking at vulnerability.
Fantastic. I've had such a fabulous time, which I always do whenever I talk to you, Captain. But today has been amazing. I don't know how much I've learned. I'm sure the audience here have learned a lot as well. And I hope you've enjoyed your time with us.
I had fun, as always, Raghu. So look forward to seeing you again soon.
We'll see you soon. Absolutely. And thank you, audience, for joining in and for all your comments and likes and, questions. And Captain, thank you once again. Next week.
Thanks, look forward to meeting up with you. And as usual, as I tell people in the end of the talk, if you had questions, couldn't ask them, couldn't get them answered, please tweet me. And
so Captain Raman, no? It's at Capt Raman, right?
CAPTRAMAN @Capt Raman. Or you search for me in Twitter, you'll find me. So look forward to seeing you there.
And same for those who are interested in getting, the full video or to connect with us. I'm at Totally Out Now or at Speaking Minds Global. And any questions that you may have even after this, any comments, please feel free to message, and we will make sure that the captain receives them and we will respond back. And next week is going to be very interesting with Gul Panag next Tuesday at the same time.
Oh, you got Gul.
You've got Gul. Yeah.
Another army grad.
Yeah, looking forward to the talk with her. And so thank you very much.
Was, my mentor in many ways. So great respect for him. Anyway, so look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.